On today's show, problems in the season opener and what needs to get cleaned up before Saturday.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the things that Capitals need to improve on before Saturday. Really things to reach for. They need to do better on the power play, but it's not just that. What else do they need to work on? Then we'll talk about things to watch in the game on Saturday. Did they take any steps forward? And did they take any steps forward in practice between now and Saturday? But let's just get into it in the first segment here, talking about problems in the season opener. And already a lot of people on social media don't read too much into this. It was only the first game of the season. I'm here to tell you right out of the gate, the power play needs to be better. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. If they don't figure this out, one game's going to turn into 2 games, is going to turn into 3 games. A bad game is going to turn into a bad habit, is going to lean into a slide. And I don't want to get too crazy here. As I understand it, is the first game. However, this is not my first time talking about this. And it's not like there were preseason games, right? They had the opportunity to work on these things. They didn't do it. This was not the team that we saw in the preseason. And I understand a lot of those players went to Hershey or got reassigned or waived or whatever the case is. But the players that are here are the players that are perceived to be the cream of the crop. And Tom Wilson, the only one that was able to find the back of the net. Let's dive into the ugliness, I guess I'm going to say, in the first game. I don't think there's any real 2 ways about it. And I had to watch the game again. I watched the highlights again because I thought to myself, is it just as simplistic as the power play struggling? And I knew that it wasn't just that, but what's the root cause? What was the intrinsic failure that the Capitals had in this game? So let's talk about that in the first segment here. And I'm going to talk about things that are bugging a lot of Capitals fans right now. And that is the power play. Yeah, that thing. That was at one time, the one thing that used to terrify teams when Ovechkin would set up from that left circle. Right now, it's kind of the opposite. The Bruins, they were not scared of the Capitals' power play. And to be clear here, their penalty kill was that much better. And I don't think that's too much of an overreaction. The Capitals, they were pushed out wide. They didn't converge with a lot of net front presence, a lot of perimeter shots, and subsequently those low quality, albeit high volume shots didn't find the back of the net. They did not test Jeremy Swayman enough. There's a reason that they backed the Brinks truck up to Jeremy Swayman's house, gave him the checkbook, said, fill it out, tell me whatever you deserve. They wanted stability in net, and ultimately that is what they got. To be clear here, though, he wasn't tested enough, but he was enough. And if you look at the roster, you still got the veterans. You got Ovechkin, Strome, Wilson, Carlson, and Sandin, and then you got the young guys coming ahead. But you're going to need your pillars to rise up. This is where Ovechkin should come out to shine. What did we see from Ovechkin? And I hate to say this because people hate when you say anything negative about Ovechkin, is that when it seems like the team struggles, he checks out. He just checks out. You saw that in this last game. You also, a real glaring example was a couple seasons ago in the playoffs against the Rangers, where the Capitals were just getting worked over by the Rangers. He's like, I'm out of here in my head. I'm somewhere else right now. That the team as a whole cannot slide into those pitfalls. Tom Wilson was the leader. There's a reason that many people believe, and I think it's kind of a foregone conclusion, that he is going to be the next captain of this team. He's the guy that finds the back of the net. He's the guy that tried to take the team on his back and pull it across the finish line, but he wasn't able to do it. But when that power play hit the ice against Boston, what we saw looked stale, it looked predictable, and it looked slow. One of the biggest knocks against the Capitals, a couple of years ago, is that they're old and slow. Not so much anymore. The slow part seems apparent still to a certain extent, but they did get younger. And I think that you're going to need to see the veterans, speed it up a little bit if they can do that. And I get it. It's game one. You're working out the kinks, but the same issues that haunted this team last year kind of crept back in. And I hate talking about it because I do talk about it every season, that special teams are important always. I remember talking about this last year, but the further you go along in the season where the games have greater impact, if your special teams struggle, whether it's the PK or the PP, your team is going to suffer, especially when the games start to have more magnitude. But Spencer Carberry, he understands it. He talked about it. He said, quote, we need more pace, We need more unpredictability. And they were very predictable, and the Boston Bruins were well prepared. I was listening to NHL Network this morning on Sirius on the way to work, and they were talking about it, that they had the head coach on there, and they're like, yeah, we kind of knew what the Capitals were going to do, and we prepared, we executed, and that's how they won. Because on paper, the Capitals are a better team, that there's not a whole lot of goal-scoring fuel in Boston. But they still found a way to get it done. Because the thing of it is, if you're the opposing penalty kill and you see Ovi posting up in his office and everybody else just standing, waiting for the puck to swing his way, you know exactly what's coming. And, it's a totally different thing nowadays, is that what we've seen in the first game, we saw it a bit in the preseason, is that Alex Ovechkin on the right side. Yeah, we're trying that again. And I think that sooner or later, he'll just, when you look at the line combos, he'll be back over on the left side, like an old pair of shoes for him. But in any event, they are trying to jumpstart and get things done a little bit easier and more. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. Less is more with Alex Ovechkin. And, when you talk about Ovi, he's still got one of the best shots in the NHL. No one's going to dispute that. That hasn't changed, but the league has adapted. There was a time when Ovi was out there, when you saw him, trying to find the back of the net, there was little that you could do to stop it. That slap shot was untouchable. That it still is. It's still rather lethal, but I think that the players are set up well ahead of that and are prepared for it. That is why you're starting to see his role on the power play a bit diminished over time. Now, teams are shading coverage his way. They're collapsing on that circle because they believe it's predictable. And when it happens, guys like Strome, Wilson need to make something happen down low, or whoever he's configured with, right? I think that the PP1, and PP2 is still a bit of a work in progress. And I'll be honest, Strome looked a little out of rhythm in this game. He was trying to force passes through the seam that just weren't there. Again, I'm going to chalk that up to first game jitters. These guys that have been there for quite some time, I think that, just the gravity of the situation, they're playing in Washington and there was a lot of fanfare, and that what could be Alex Ovechkin's final season, and already just talking about it, my head's starting to spin. So I can relate to it to an extent. It's like when you see a band on their first show to start a tour, sometimes they're working out the kinks. That was, I think, the case for the Capitals. But Wilson, to his credit, brought energy. You could see him trying to screen Swayman, trying to crash the net, but there just wasn't enough movement off the puck. That Tom Wilson, good old number 43, can't do it all. And ultimately, that's what kills you. Even Rasmus Sandin seemed a little bit hesitant out there. And you want him firing the puck more. You want him walking the line, drawing defenders, creating shooting lines. Instead, we got too much hesitation, too much thinking. Something the Capitals have been guilty of before, looking for the cutesy pass. When I'm driving for the net and I'm just going to shoot it, nope, I'm going to wait for the guy coming behind and shoot it to him. And what were you doing? You had your opportunity. It might not have made it, but it sure as heck didn't. So the Capitals need to have a finish it attitude. I was going to use another word, but this is a family podcast, that you just really need to have a fighter's instinct to get this done. And ultimately, the Capitals did not have enough fight. And that's the thing. Good teams, the good teams around the league like Florida, Colorado, Tampa, those kind of teams, they move the puck quickly. They get it off the wall and they force defenders to rotate. And those are the simple things that maybe aren't so simple. Again, I got quite a bit of conversation on Subtext, which is the Capitals Insiders. Again, check the link in the show description. People texting me. What were your thoughts on the game? What should they change? I was texting people back like a wild man today, trying to keep caught up with everyone. But that was the common thread, was that what are we going to do? Is the power play doom and gloom? Are we all over with? I don't think it's the case. It's the thing that the Capitals will work on, that Spencer Carberry is still the head coach. The assistants that are put into place, they are going to draw plans and get it done. I have no doubt. It's terrible that they had to lose the first game, but it's kind of historically apropos for this team to lose the first game of the season, but I'm not going to read too much into it. I guess I am going to judge it, let's say 3 to 5 games from now. And if I'm still coming to this show on you talking about the Capitals and the woes on the power play, then I think that we need to have a more broad conversation. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about how to improve before Saturday. They got a couple days here to get it done. We had Friday, tomorrow, and Saturday. What needs to change? The power play, the PK. Can the Capitals figure it out? I'll discuss next. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Now, personally, I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed live lines during the game. And listen, on any given Sunday or Monday or Thursday, I got my team that I'm following. And if you're out there, you're no doubt a fan of the Commanders or the Ravens. But say you want vested interest in all of the games, including the Commanders or the Ravens. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, they got that much more exciting. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today to get started. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2 here, we're talking about a plan to improve. In the first segment, I kind of talked about what went wrong. And now we're going to talk about how to improve it. Things to talk about here, because the Caps they have the personnel to fix this. They have some great veterans mixed in with some young talent. And, you take a look at the second unit, that is where it actually gets a little interesting. The players involved there, it seemed like they were starting to generate some momentum, but ultimately did not get enough going. And a lot of the guys out there are younger guys. They move, they don't stand still. And players that I like is, I talk about him on here quite often, is Connor McMichael. Kind of a guy that was, had the first kick of the can, as everyone said, at that third line center position. As it turns out, starts this season on the second line left wing, and a big contributor. What do I want to see from Connor McMichael is a bit of what we saw last year, doing whatever it takes to score a goal. He's getting more confident carrying the puck. You can see it. He's not afraid to cut into traffic, not afraid to dish cross ice. there's not the fear in Connor McMichael anymore that I'm going to get reassigned or loaned to Hershey, that I'm here and just go out there and play carefree. And that is what he's done. And that's what you want to see from a young player who's been shuffled in his career between Hershey and the Capitals. But, I think it's a fair thing to say that he has made the Capitals his forever home. He's finally sticking, and that staff trusts him, and ultimately why he is entrusted with a lot of things. That you saw Connor McMichael playing on the second wing. You also saw that second line get shook up a little bit as well, that they were trying to jumpstart some offense. Connor McMichael moved around, Wilson and Protas moved around, and then you saw some changes on the bottom six there as well. That Spencer Carberry did what he could do to try to jumpstart the offense. It just wasn't enough. But then, you take a look at like a guy like Hendrix Lapierre. Again, he is going to be on a leash. I hate to use the word leash, but like I'm going to say a 10, 12, maybe 15 games to see what he has in the tank. Is he the answer at the third line center position? If not, if that is the perception, the Capitals signed him to a bridge deal that Connor McMichael's like, hey, I still want to go back to the center position. I don't want to go down the negative rabbit hole. I'm not saying that is going to happen. What I am saying is that they have a plan in place. But when you watch him out there, there's a little hesitation move he does, just enough to make a defender bite. And that opens lanes, for the other players that are out there. And I think that is huge, what he has been able to accomplish playing confidently. And what I'm looking for Lapierre is to bring stability to that third line. The biggest weakness of the Capitals team last year, make no mistake about it. And we saw stymied offensive production in the first game. And, man, am I reading a whole lot? I'm talking a whole lot about the first game of the season, but this is where we're at. This is Locked On Capitals. We're taking it down to a granular level. We're talking about changes that might need to be made. And I'm talking about a guy like Sonny Milano that, sooner or later, again, a lot of questions on subtext on the Locked On Capitals insiders. You think they should put Milano in there? I don't think that it is going to happen on Saturday unless someone gets injured, in practice or whatever the case is. Sometimes injuries just pop up and you get inserted. But if the Capitals struggle offensively in game number 3, I would definitely not be opposed to putting Sonny Milano in there, as long as it's the Sonny that we saw in the preseason. Because when you talk about Sonny, he's got underrated vision. He's one of those guys who, when the puck's on his stick, you can tell he sees the ice differently. He just doesn't throw the pucks around. He actually looks for soft spots in coverage. And I look at my early notes when the Capitals first acquired Sonny Milano, is that he was projected to be in Hershey. Played so well that they're like, we're going to keep this guy on the big team. I wrote in my notes that he has a good nose for the puck. I think, that, Sonny Milano last year only played 3 games, and the games he did play were not some of his best work. It seems like message sent, message received for Sonny Milano. And at least in the preseason, it is looking really, really good. If those younger guys start converting, Carberry might have to juggle things up. Again, I don't see that in game number 2. Could be in game number 3. One of the things that we know about Carbs is he is not opposed to making changes here. Maybe you move Ovechkin around. Maybe you let Strome play the half wall instead of the bumper. Maybe Carlson and Sandin rotate up a little bit more. That, you take a look at it. I guess it's going to be trying things out, right, to see what sticks to the wall. But I think that, you are going to see some different looks. Anything to make the defenders guess, because the one thing I'm going to say about the Capitals in game 1 is they were predictable. And I'll say this again, too many years now, the power play has been too stagnant. It has been too predictable. It has been too milquetoast, too lackluster. How many different words can I use to describe the power play for the Capitals? And you got elite talent here. You've got veteran leadership, but you've got to modernize it. Carberry knows that. He's been open to it. And he said the team's experimenting with, quote, fluid rotations, unquote, meaning Ovi might not always be glued to that left dot. And we saw that on the power play last year, that they tried to move him around a little bit more to kind of keep the teams guessing. In a lot of ways, it was kind of just drawing the tension away from the actual player that was going to shoot the shot because everyone's covering Ovechkin. So I think that is something I think they'll at least experiment, because when you got Ovi roaming or maybe sneaking into the slot where the puck's moving, it gives the defense fits. Like, what's going on here? Ovechkin, why aren't you going back to your office? So I think that if they could shake up the snow globe and make the opponent guess a little bit more, then I think that they'll have some success. Again, I think that you will see a lot of different things tinkered with, I guess, between now and then, and maybe even in game 2. Carberry's not the kind of guy that he's just like, no, these are the lines. This is the way I wrote it out. I'm going down with this ship. He's going to keep rotating throughs until he finds the right fit. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about things to watch in game number 2. Did the Capitals improve on the power play? Did they improve on their zone entries? All of that and much more straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in the final segment here, let's talk about what to look for in game number 2. I think the big thing, of course, is the biggest weakness in the last game was the power play. The inability to get net front, that it was too much perimeter passing, that they got a lot of shots, but not a lot of high quality shots. And it's easy to talk about from my studio here, talking to you or you watching it at home. It's up to the players to go out there and execute. Do they have what it takes? So let's talk about that in the final segment here. And we're talking 5-on-5. The team looked decent. Defensively, John Carlson still your rock. Rasmus Sandin still finding consistency. But man, his puck moving ability is elite when he is on. Rasmus Sandin, of course, the Capitals had to move things around to get him. And the long-term answer, one of the long-term answers on the blue line, as we know that Marty Faravari in the offseason signed a lengthy contract, that is your pillars on the blue line. He continues to grow. He's logging heavy minutes, taking on top matchups. And, let's not forget about the net-minding tandem of Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren. If those guys give you steady goaltending, you can win a lot of games even when your special teams are not clicking. And, to be clear here, I want to say that at least one of those goals, I would say that Logan Thompson would like to have had back. But all things considered, I'm going to say that Logan Thompson played good. Not great, but good. And I'm not going to hang the loss on him. That's for sure. I mean, he wasn't perfect. So, I'm not absolving him either. But what I am saying is he's good. And the tandem, as is serviceable. Again, I hate to circle back to, I would have preferred it to be Clay Stevenson. I still think the Capitals need another veteran to fix this team. Because guess what? Jack Roslovic, we talked about him. He's off the market. He went to Edmonton, if memory serves. That was news that I heard today as well. So the Capitals, they pushed all of their chips in on this youth movement, and you take a look at it. I like it. At least I hope I like it. That we'll see how it turns out. And, the fact that the Capitals have a lot of young talent down in Hershey as well, say that there is inconsistent play. Those are the things and where the Capitals are at. But the big thing is, like I say, when you have steady goaltending, that you can play more carefree, that if I make a mistake, that the opponent's not going to find the back of the net, that you have someone that's competent between the pipes in net. And I do believe the Capitals have that in LT and Chucky Sideburns there. And here's the thing too, the power play, like I've talked about, things to look at. That is the thing to underline, boldface type, highlight. The power play has to become a weapon again if this team wants to be competitive. You take a look at the teams that do it the best, they have an elite level power play. Their special teams click. Because you take a look around the Rangers, I guess I'm kind of up in the air on the Rangers at this point. I heard they're going to take big steps forward, and then I saw them play, and I'm like, I'm going to hold judgment on that. Hurricanes, I expect to be better. A lot of people say the Devils. The Devils are going to be better than the Capitals based on, I guess, a lot of the young talent, but you saw how well the Capitals, just another case of the Caps getting no love. And they all have dynamic, fast moving power plays. And it's something, I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is one of the weaknesses of the Capitals, but it is. And the Capitals, the one thing I know is they cannot afford to be predictable anymore. And to be clear here, Ovechkin's still the heartbeat of this team. You can see the fire. You can see when he's frustrated. And I'm going to say that 9 times out of 10, he's not mailing it in, even though, like I say, when it seems like teams just get worked over, you see him checking out. But he can't do it alone. Tom Wilson can't do it alone. And we're going to need to see the young players that we have on this team for a reason. We're going to need to see more from Ryan Leonard. Is Alexei Protas going to have another record season? Connor McMichael, Dylan Strome, Tom, all these guys that had really great seasons last year, can they continue to keep growing, to continue to keep getting better? Those are the things that, let's just kind of break it all down. Special teams, I want to see improvement on the power play, zone entries, the PK, more better shots on net. The volume was there, but high quality shots on net, not so many perimeter, really easy saves for the opposing netminder. And having the veterans be the leaders and, kind of holding, the young players accountable. Like, you're on this team, bring it. That, Sortif is here. The Capitals had to give up a couple draft picks to get him. And you take a look at Ryan Leonard. These guys beat out a lot of different players down in Hershey that could have made this roster. I'm talking Crystal and Miroshnichenko. That, if they don't work for somehow, some way, and again, this is way too easy to be getting this serious about it, but if this is something that continues for the next, let's say, handful of games, those are the things that the Capitals will have to explore. Because like I say, I'm not too down in the dumps, but what we saw in the first game was rather ugly. The Capitals have got to be better. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And now that the NHL season is back for your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned, get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.